Hello and welcome to Brain Trust Live number 504.
This week on the podcast, Californians, if you just got your 94-page sample ballot, never fear. Our prop guide is on the way.
Plus, Eric Adams. He's not just bad at funding libraries, he's bad at criming too.
And what is going on with the Nebraska Senate seat is a question we never thought we'd ask.
Plus, Tim Walz was the model of Minnesota nice even when presented with the world's most punchable face.
And a note to the Harris campaign, there is no constituency of Dick Cheney voters.
We'll have all this and more.
This is Brain Trust Live. Hey y'all, I'm Brent.
I'm Lila, and you can find us on the web at www.braintrustlive.com.
You almost saw us getting hit by the Tim Walz motorcade earlier today.
Yeah, we
drove
just
right by us.
Saw the longest motorcade that I've ever seen with my own human eyes go by, and then we had to check the candidate schedules to find out which Harris Walz campaign person was behind the motorcade.
Yeah.
It was Tim Walz. He's out here. Well, he's out here fundraising.
Right.
He's certainly not out here campaigning for the votes of California residents.
No.
And we've been talking a lot about the props because our prop guide is going to come out either late this week, early next week. And so we've been chatting about the props, and I have a few ideas for props that are meant to just game the system and cause mayhem.
Yeah.
But I have a prop idea that I feel like is a constructive thought that's not fully formed yet, but that I wanted to pitch in light of our Tim Walz run-in.
Yeah, no, I like it.
Which is, I think that we should have a prop that requires that any out-of-state candidate that comes to California on a fundraising mission be forced to do one public event per fundraising meeting.
Yeah.
So if you are doing a private dinner for $1,000 a plate with a bunch of rich Californians, you should be required in exchange for being able to grace our city with your request for money to do one event for California residents.
Oh, yeah, and it should be like a town hall event, too.
Yes.
Not like you just giving your campaign stump speech at an arena that Beyonce comes to.
That's right.
I want FaceTime.
That's right.
With you. Because it's the only time I'm ever going to get it.
Exactly. And I feel like we could create a menu of options.
Yeah.
I will say that if you go to an event to support a down ballot candidate, I would maybe accept your stump speech there as long as you're doing it to support California Democrats or California Republicans, if that's your deal. I don't know what your life is. But like, as long as you're doing that to support a California politician, maybe that would be allowed. Otherwise, I want a town hall. I want it to be something that is not ticketed in a way that makes it impossible for regular people to get those tickets.
Right.
Because the rich people already get to pay $1 zillion to have FaceTime with you. And you're hearing their concerns at these events because there are Q&As at these events.
And you're hearing other people's concerns from other people. You know, I mean, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are probably on a first-name basis with, Betsy Joe from Pittsburgh.
Right. Exactly.
And like...
They used to, well, in Brent's home state of Iowa, everyone used to just shake hands with every single candidate and personally deliver their specific need about their farm or whatever.
But these bozos expect me to vote for them and only come here to collect checks.
That's right. So I feel like the prop system, flawed as it is the perfect vehicle for us to address that issue. And I think New York State has the same problem, and I would recommend the same solution. You should have to do one public event per private event.
I love it.
And I look forward to everyone's feedback on that prop.
Yeah.
Brilliant prop idea.
Yeah.
I have another brilliant prop idea that I'm going to share with you that's unrelated to this topic.
Well, any prop idea seems brilliant in comparison to at least a couple of the props that you, as a California resident, are going to have to vote on. So we're going to do the guide is coming. We're going to probably record a special where we walk you through it.
Yeah.
But listen, we've got to game the system.
We've got to game the system because the system is gaming.
That's what people are doing with it.
The system is only games.
That's exactly right.
One of the games that people are playing is taking on individual vendettas against either organizations or entities of some sort, and forcing us to vote on needless props that are just about retribution for other props that other entities have supported. And we have one of those on the ballot this year that is related.
It's literally been dubbed the revenge prop.
Yeah.
I mean, it's literally people are sort of like taking out their anger on each other, rich people.
Well, I was going to say, it's California, so it is realtors taking out their anger on rent control.
There was that tech prop a couple years ago, too. Remember? Where there was like, I can't remember exactly the details of it, but it was literally just like multiple rich people who I think were like trying to sort of like claim that they...
Well, and it's what all dialysis props are. Totally. Those are revenge props. And then there was one that was about like tomato farms, and so it was like against one tomato farmer, and so, like, nobody has time.
No.
No one has interest. No one has energy. So
we're going to think up a lot of crazy props.
Yes. And one of the props that we're going to recommend for a future cycle is a prop where we just have a vendetta against one guy.
Yeah.
And we force all of California to vote on a vague vendetta that is worded carefully to make it seem like it's a great idea, but is actually just applying to one individual that we hate. Right. And then at the end, we're going to reveal that was what we used the prop system for.
Yeah.
We haven't worked out the details yet, but it just seems like that's the natural end to this situation where we can do revenge props by funding incredibly expensive props against entities that we're just mad at because they supported policies we didn't support. Anyway.
But yeah, be on the lookout. The prop guide is coming. I got my ballot.
Yeah.
I'm gonna fill it out when I go home tonight.
I mean,
It just came. I feel like I did that the last round, and it didn't work out in the way that I had hoped it did because
I was gonna say
my plan was that once I did it, then I could fill it out and it would just be done, and then I wouldn't have to think about it any longer.
Your candidate dropped out of the race.
Well, right, that happened. I forgot about that. But also, like,
that wasn't even the story you were about to tell. Oh
no,
my God.
No, I'm just talking about the last presidential election because I was so annoyed, and I was like,
I had a nervous breakdown voting in that election.
I know, and I was like, I just need to get this out of my home. It needs to be away from here, and then everything will be fine.
That's right.
Which is not what happens. No. But you know what? I said to you, because I was like, I texted Lila earlier, and I was like, I think I'm going to fill out my ballot. And you were like, oh, I don't remember exactly what you said to me. But I was like, you know what? There's not going to be a day between now and November 5th where I'm going to wake up and be like, I'm so excited to fill out this ballot today. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't be excited. Like, get excited to vote. I get it. You know what I mean? But I'm just sort of like, especially here in California, I'm like, you know, for a million different reasons that we're going to talk about. Kamala Harris is annoying me right now. What am I supposed to vote for? Adam freaking Schiff. And then there's 74 different props that are all more annoying than the next one. It's just sort of like...
And we don't have that exciting of a congressional candidate, even though we have an open seat.
I gotta get it. I need it out of the home.
Here's why I would say don't do it. Because of what happened to you during the primaries, where we had to vote trade, because Brent voted for a candidate who dropped out and then dropped back into the race.
Yeah.
That was chaos.
Well... Who I'm voting for
it won't matter.
is between me and Jesus.
No, I'm just saying.
Maybe
you don't know
the podcast listeners, if I decide to tell them later. Use your imaginations.
You don't know what weird shenanigans are going to happen to you personally that relationship with you and Jesus and the candidate this early on because of what happened to you Jesus and the candidate
Lord works
last
in mysterious ways.
Exactly. So all I'm saying is that your relationship with the candidate and Jesus could change on a dime during October, a month famous for surprises.
That's true.
And you might not know what... Don't box yourself in, is all I'm saying.
Okay.
Vote early because it's responsible, but don't vote so early that you box yourself into a situation as you may have already done a couple of times in your life.
Sure.
That's all I'm saying.
Right,
but you know,
enough.
do you.
Thanks.
And if you're in LA, and if I think all of California, your ballots are arriving. So pay attention. They're in the mail if you don't have them in your home.
Right.
And what is also in the mail / in your home is a 142-page voter guide. At least that is how long the voter guide that came to my house is.
Wait, is it really? I didn't look.
Yes.
It was thick.
It's thick. Right. It's 142 pages, and it's not the only voter guide because there's also the sample ballot, and that's something like 90 pages. So I want to use this moment, just before we move on from this topic, to discuss with California and Los Angeles and just like people at large, whether there's a better system for that doesn't require 142 pages of reading to make an informed vote.
Sure.
I know we're going to talk about this when we talk about the props in our future episode. And I know we're going to talk about it probably ad nauseum for the rest of our lives. But I feel like the moment that the ballot guide arrives in your house is a moment where you think to yourself, is voting worth it? And that shouldn't ever be a thought that you have to have about voting.
Well, that I think gets to my point of like why I just want to do it. Because I'm like, I just need to do it because it's going to feel like a chore.
And here's the thing.
It shouldn't feel like a chore.
In a lot of places, it's not. This is like a problem that is not uniquely Californian, but certainly specifically a problem in California. Not every state requires an 142-page voter guide.
Right.
Not every state, a lot of the Western states do, because that's where the props are being overused mostly.
True.
But not every state asks this of its residents, and I would just suggest that as we do our get out the vote work and encourage people to vote and tell people about the candidates and get them excited to fill out their ballot and all of those things, that we also think to ourselves, could we make voting more accessible by making it easier? And not easier, like logistically easier. Easier, like you don't have to have a master's degree to vote in an informed and responsible way. Anyway, that's all I'll say about that, because I'm very excited to talk about our next story, which is the Eric Adams indictment.
Right? No.
This is some of the... First of all, it's some of the greatest text threads in modern criming history.
Oh, I know. They're so good.
The text threads... Eric Adams, listen, being the mayor of New York City involves a certain amount of criming, no matter who you are. All mayors are criming. All city officials are criming. City governments are just patronage, festivals where people who've been in office for 30 years are getting paid off or paying off somebody so that they can continue to have a nice quality of life because they don't make any money.
Yeah.
And then the mayor gets wrapped up in a scandal, and nobody ever likes a mayor at the end of a mayor's term. Being a mayor is a terrible job, and I don't recommend it. But within that scale, there's also good and bad criming. And I don't mean good and bad criming like the crimes are better than other crimes. All the crimes are bad. I mean good and bad criming like some successful mayors, the mayors you remember as being powerful mayors who changed things, those are mayors who understood the rules of criming.
Sure.
Boss Tweed was good at criming. That's why we feared him. Ed Koch was good at criming till the end. And when he got caught, that's when he stopped being good at criming. That's also when he stopped being the mayor.
Sure.
Rudy Giuliani was good at criming at the beginning. The criming also started to catch up with him because his personal life started to catch up with him. He never really got bad at criming, but he got really bad at being in the public eye.
Well, he eventually got very bad.
But he's gotten very bad. Yes. No, in his mayoral year. Sorry.
Yes.
Let me clarify that. Whew, what a mistake. But Eric Adams has brought a level of Mr. Magoo level incompetence to criming that is truly astonishing.
Well, and it's so funny too because it's almost as if we could have known.
It's exactly as if we could have known.
It's so funny. I feel like nobody has really been loving this more than, other than
Lila
literally
Nordstrom.
Everyone.
Yeah.
Lila Nordstrom and all of New York City. But, what's his name? Ran for president, also ran for mayor of,
Bloomberg?
Independent. No, you went to a candidate for him that he was supposed
Andrew
to.
Yang.
Andrew Yang.
Yeah.
My God.
Wow.
My brain. Because when
the
he
end
was,
of the day, you guys.
he's posted, I think, 700
yeah.
times from that debate when he was running against Eric Adams, being like, "This guy's corrupt. We know he's corrupt. Here are the reasons that he's corrupt." And then he became mayor, and it turns out he was corrupt.
I would venture to suggest, however, that Andrew Yang kind of misunderstood the assignment there.
No, I don't disagree with that. But
I feel like New Yorkers don't mind a corrupt mayor.
Sure.
With limits, though. And one of those limits is you have to know the rules of criming. And the rules of criming are, take some payoffs from some entities, unsavory entities. You're certainly in bed with the construction industry, and there's certainly some kind of shenanigan going on with some mob-like entity. There's you're cutting deals with various people. You're under the table. All of that is part of being the mayor. And I wouldn't suggest otherwise. There's no mayor who's above all the criming. Criming where you're like, should we accept money from Turkey in an illegal fashion? And the mayor's like, yeah, let's do it.
I know.
In a text thread.
That was one of my favorite. That was my favorite threads, where it was like whoever this person was in Turkey, or who was texting, I think one of Adam's aides, said something about essentially to the effect of here are the crimes that we're going to do. Right. I mean, in the sense of does he want this money or whatever? Right. And they were like, are you in? And the aide was like, well, I don't think the mayor would probably be into that, but I'll ask him, essentially. Yeah. And then the text thread continues and was like, no, we're in.
Yeah. No, it's literally here are some crimes we could commit together. Are you interested? And the aide is like, probably not. These are crimes. And then comes back later and is like, we are interested.
Nope, I checked
Please continue criming.
I checked with Eric Adams himself, personally.
He would like to crime.
And we are down.
And then they thought that they could get away with it because they could just delete the text.
Change the passwords on their phones.
Right, pretend like they have no idea how to get into their phones. Every moment of the criming was so outrageously incompetent.
Yeah.
And this is not most of the charges that have been dropped of late are Turkey related because what is Turkey doing? Why are they trying to pay off the mayor of New York City to build a tower that isn't safe? I have some questions about the kinds of crimes that they're trying to commit and what the ultimate crime is, because it can't be that they needed to have an unsafe tower built to have dignitaries stay in. That can't be what the crime was. But whatever. There are also some investigations going on regarding his interactions with other countries, including Israel, China, Qatar, South Korea, and Uzbekistan. So a real who's who of countries you want to be criming with. And, this has been one of the greatest moments. I was in New York for the indictments.
Oh, I know. What a time.
It was, what a time. Because the joy that this brought to regular New Yorkers, before the indictments came down, there was like a palpable sense that like everyone hated the mayor in a new and exciting way. Like, everyone always hates the mayor. Sure. Whatever.
Yeah.
You can't go anywhere without everyone hating the mayor. In New York City, in early September, you could not go anywhere without even apolitical people taking pot shots at the mayor. Like, everyone was so over this guy.
Sure.
They were making fun of him because he was, because all he ever talks about is trash and rats. And I would contend, trash and rats, big problems in New York City. A more competent mayor could have actually owned those problems and probably made New Yorkers think they were doing a great job.
Sure.
Eric Adams, everything he did turned to nonsense. Like, he could not get taken serious. He thought he was going to have us put our trash in trash cans.
That's what I was going to say. Like, didn't he pretend like he invented trash bins?
Yeah, he pretended like he invented trash bins and ignored in the process the main reason why trash is stored the way it is stored in New York City, which is that, New York City lacks an infrastructure for trash. It's disgusting. Sorry about it. But 40-story buildings cannot fit their trash in tiny trash bins that are designed for residential homes. Sure. I mean, suburban homes. Like, so he gave all these buildings trash bins, and then the buildings were like, well, we can't fit our trash in these trash bins, so I don't know what you want us to do. And what they did was nothing, and there's been no solution to the trash problem, and there's still rats everywhere. So I don't know what he was doing with any of those. But the point is, you, in any kind of room you were in, and of course this was the September season, and so I was at events around September 11th, so I was in some rooms I'm not normally in, or I'm in them in September, but I wasn't just like hanging out with like activists and progressives.
Yeah.
And no matter where you went, everyone hated the mayor.
Sure.
Like, cops hated the mayor.
Well, he did like some ridiculous things.
Like Law and Order people.
Like, besides the trash situation, there was also like, I feel like the other thing that like you have to know as the mayor is that there are probably some things that you like. The cutting back of the hours at libraries.
The library thing. I had not internalized how angry people were about the library thing. And it was mentioned by everyone, everywhere you went. Everywhere you went, people were talking about the library cuts. And I was like, this is just the kind of thing I expected Eric Adams to do. And I was upset about it because I knew he's a dipshit and that he was going to do dipshitty things, including cutting libraries. I had not fully realized how much everyone hung on to that slight until I was in New York this month. Yeah. And it was all anyone was talking about. And that happened months ago. And right. It was crazy. No, also, there was the sense that his administration was already unraveling.
And there was the recent subway thing, too, which was the police, certainly. But I mean, like that,
his reaction to it.
Police, anyway, so.
Well, no, but also his reaction to it was part of why it fell apart. I mean, why it became such a problem for him, because he said something about how he saw some prayers to the victims of a crime that had been committed by the NYPD, and he said something about how a police officer had been injured and failed to note that it was the police that shot him.
Yeah, but it was just the perfect time to have this type of scandal. Oh. That people were ready to hate him because they already were. But I mean,
exactly. Yeah. It's been a joy. An absolute joy. And already 3 more aides resigned today, including the second Banks brother. There was the Chancellor Banks brother who left after he got raided by the feds on the first day of school. And now there was the public safety Banks, the other Banks brother, because they're twins. As you know, I keep an eye on twins in public life. And so I was everywhere. And
in your private life. Spying on twins everywhere.
I was keeping an eye on the twins situation. And the second twin is gone now as well from the Adams administration. An interesting situation in New York City is that New York City really doesn't have self-rule in the way that you might imagine it does. The state government in New York State has the power to overrule a lot of what goes on at the city level, which is why there are so many problematic tax policies that the state, that's why the commuter tax went down.
That's what I was about to say. That's how Kathy Hochul was able to shoot down
that's congestion pricing, but the commuter tax was the original Giuliani era giveaway that led to the need for congestion pricing. And all of those are something that the state can veto. And the other thing that the governor can do is remove the mayor of New York City from office. So there's a lot of conversation now about whether Kathy Hochul has the guts, she doesn't.
No.
And what it would take to cause her to develop the guts.
None.
And I feel like it's a hopeless situation.
Yeah.
But I do feel like this is not survivable for Eric Adams. So, like, something is going to happen.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. But in the same way that I felt confident that, like, Joe Biden would not be our presidential candidate in the end after that debate, I feel confident that Eric Adams cannot continue to be the mayor of New York City.
Yeah.
I think he's going to hang on too long. And I think that he is going to exercise bad judgment.
Yeah.
And whatever that means.
Yeah.
But I don't think this is survivable to him. The real issue we have waiting in the wings is that Andrew Cuomo thinks that he's going to throw his hat in to be the mayor.
Of course he does.
Like, get all the way out of America. Don't even just be in New York State. Be nowhere. Be in the ocean. Go fully away.
He himself would be happier elsewhere, wouldn't he?
I would think so. The one place where his worst instincts could be indulged is the New York City mayor's office.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like, already being the governor, he was like a total asshole to everyone. And the real reason that he got kind of ousted is because everyone hated him.
Right.
Like, it was literally just everyone had personal vendettas against him because he's an asshole.
Which is part, and I mentioned this to you too, and I understand there's always a risk whenever somebody like this gets in the race. But, like, on some level, if I were a voter in New York, I would be like, let me vote for anyone running against fucking Andrew Cuomo, because nothing would give me more joy than to
telling that guy fuck you,
than to tell him with my vote to get out of town.
I don't think it's a feasible thing. I feel like it's a miscalculation to think that he can come back with New Yorkers after he pulled that IDF shit.
I think he's recently left in disgrace, and then also politically.
Politically, I think his... You know, he disempowered city voters intentionally while he was governor, and that was the first big scandal that got him.
Yeah.
So I don't know why city voters would agree.
I think that so many people in these last couple congressional races also have realized the repercussions of some of that, which he was really at the helm of when he was running state government, as to how they ended up with some of those terrible maps and things that really lost the Democrats the entire House of Representatives.
No, exactly. I just don't see a world in which he's not just, like, toxic.
Yeah.
But I love that he thinks this is going to be his moment.
I know.
Same. I mean, New York City politicians always think that the next moment is going to be their moment. Anthony Weiner almost became the mayor of New York City after his disgrace. I mean, that's the kind of situation we're living in New York City. So no one is too ridiculous to be the mayor of New York City, but I think Andrew Cuomo might be too toxic and also too similar stylistically to Adams in that they're both just complete assholes.
Yeah.
I think that often in a moment like this, it's like the end of the Koch era is how we got David Dinkins, who is probably, at least to public life, the most sort of, like, gentle mayor New York City has had in probably 2 lifetimes. Like, and I think that is because people were sick of Ed Koch and his stupid showboating nonsense.
Yeah, sure.
And I feel like that's kind of like an era that we're in right now where it's like people were mad about de Blasio, so we went in the other direction and went with a dipshit. Because de Blasio was kind of flaky and late to everything. And then it's like, now we're like, oh yeah, that doesn't work either. Yeah. And so I feel like we're not gonna want an Andrew Cuomo after that. But what do I know?
Yeah. The one thing I feel like that makes me happiest about this, just sort of like broadly, and a lot of people were, you know, bringing this up, but at the time of Adams' election, a lot of people were like, well, this is the model. Right? Yes. This is how Democrats win every election from here on out
by being Republicans.
By being Republicans and by
Law and order Republicans.
And by being police, and I mean, certainly Kamala Harris is attempting to follow this model right now, but
she's following it in a different style intentionally, I think, because I feel like there's the background version of it, and then there's the version of it where you're sort of like leading with the kind of bombast.
Sure.
Because that's what the Law and Order candidacy is really about in New York City.
Yeah. But there were a lot of think pieces about how Eric Adams was the next guy, and maybe he himself would even be the next president, and a lot of people have been quote tweeting that Nate Silver tweet from at the time where he basically was just sort of like, this is the greatest candidate for Democrats that's ever existed in this lifetime. And I always hated that idea because I felt like it was a bad idea. So I'm glad that maybe we can just sort of, at least for now, discount that as an idea.
Well, and I think we really can, because we're about to talk about a candidate who is sort of the opposite model.
Right.
Which is Dan Osborne, who's running for Senate in Nebraska. And he's running as an independent. He's a really interesting candidate. He's basically a populist and mostly a progressive populist. Right. And that is an interesting story, I think, for similar reasons to this, which is that, you know, when we talk about kind of like what the future of the Democratic Party looks like and what kind of how they're planning to both brand and mold themselves in this new era. Like, this is the exact opposite approach, because he's both not a Democrat and also finds the Democratic Party toxic in Nebraska. And like, this, I think, is like probably actually the future of the Democratic Party.
Well, I wish it would be. I think there's going to be a lot of loss before we get to this place, because basically, I think this is really interesting, because we've talked a lot about Senate races, and we talked about some of the Senate math last time when we were talking about the Ted Cruz race and whatever the Florida race is. I can't even remember who's running down there, but, and sort of like the fact that we're probably going to lose Montana, and we're probably going to, definitely going to lose West Virginia. There's this weird thing in Nebraska right now where there's no Democrat running. There's the sitting Republican senator, and then there's this guy, Dan Osborne, who is running as an independent, who, as you pointed out, is like much closer to a Democrat and probably to the left of some of our current Democrats on some issues. Of course, he still is sort of like doing a lot of this, like, he's wants to be tough on the border, and he wants to be.
He's not doing anything that Democrats themselves are not doing.
No, 100%.
And he's far to the left of a lot of Democrats on other issues that are base issues for Democrats.
Right, exactly. And he is actually, it seems like, winning that race. It seems like he may very well win. He's leading in like multiple recent polls right now. And I just think that's really interesting, because you may end up in a world where if he does choose to caucus with Democrats, then they may like technically end up being 50-50 and in the majority, assuming Harris wins. They may sort of like backdoor their way into 50-50 by having somebody who's not a Democrat who is most times probably going to caucus with him. Because I want to talk about his platform, because it does seem to me to be a little bit more of a throwback to Bernie. It's not as socialism-y as Bernie, but it's populist, and in the sense that sort of like we were hoping that would be the direction that they would
I think
go.
This is a guy who I saw speak in early September at that same event that I was at that had Andrew Yang speaking at it, and he was a guy. It was an event with all independent candidates, and he got the whole room to cheer for unions.
Yeah, he's a union.
He's a
guy.
labor organizer.
He's worked in factories.
Yeah, and he became an organizer by necessity, because the factory that he had worked at for his whole life changed their pay structure and changed some policies, and he kind of got involved off that basis.
Right. But he's super, like, passing the PRO Act is like one of the main pillars on his website of like what his policy is, which is the pro union bill that Democrats couldn't get passed, in part because people like Joe Manchin and various others didn't want to pass it themselves.
Well,
actual Democrats, supposedly.
It's an interesting moment for independent candidates right now, because in a lot of ways, the real issue that Dan Osborne has in terms of like running as a Democrat is not, first of all, it's impossible to win anything in Nebraska as a Democrat. So maybe that's part of it as well. But I also think he's actually not in line with the Democratic Party because he's pretty anti-corporate. And
100%.
That's such an interesting problem for him to be having with the sort of party on the left in, the sort of only party really on the left.
We have two giant corporate parties right now.
Yeah. So someone like him, who should have a home in the Democratic Party because he is a labor organizer, he's a progressive populist on most issues. And when the issues that he is sort of farther to the right on are not issues that are sort of outside of the realm of Democratic politics in this moment, but are issues that have to do with external issues. He's a sort of progressive populist domestically, and his politics externally are complicated.
Right. Yes.
And I think the idea that there is no room for somebody who is sort of like domestically representing where the values of most Democratic voters actually lie.
Right.
Because, and actually, like, this is the reason he can run as an independent also is a lot of Republicans are anti-corporate. This is actually a really popular ideology across the spectrum.
We have been saying that since probably the early days of this podcast, that if we ever wanted to sort of like, come together on anything, it would be that. I always felt like
this is a winning coalition idea.
I always felt like that was one reason why Elizabeth Warren was a pretty good candidate for president.
It's why Bernie Sanders took off the way he did.
Totally. But, that was sort of like her that was her main talking point. Oftentimes was just sort of corporate power and sort of like coming down on that.
It's so popular. It's so easy to campaign on. It wins even in places like Nebraska.
Yeah.
It's something that you can pull Trump voters out of their haze off the basis of, but you can't do that if you're sort of in the corporate Democratic world.
Right.
And so I understand why this campaign is an independent campaign, but it's so interesting because he's far to the left of most of the Democratic candidates that were running in other swing states and battleground states.
Right. And would never admit to being a Democrat.
Never.
And because he's not. And he claims he's a lifelong independent, and I sort of believe him.
No, I agree. I felt that as I saw him deliver his stump speech. He's also, he's a compelling speaker. He's a good candidate in a lot of ways. But he showed up to that forum in a T-shirt and a trucker hat.
Sure
he is doing his blue collar part.
Yeah. And he wants to sell. I think some of his reasoning for some of these things is interesting too, where you don't necessarily hear. So he wants to raise the minimum wage, right? But, Democrats obviously would tell you that it's so people can have a living wage and can be able to afford things and this and that and the other. And I agree with all those things. Obviously, I think people should get a living wage. But his reasoning for it, I thought was interesting because he said that he thinks that the federal minimum wage needs to come up to at least Nebraska's, which is $12 an hour, because the fact that other states surrounding Nebraska can pay their workers less is making Nebraska less competitive.
This is so smart.
And it's just a better way to sell it in a place like that. That doesn't mean he doesn't also believe that people should have a living wage and be able to house their family.
But it's so smart to find the other reason that is about. I mean, this is like
you have been talking about this with healthcare all the time.
Where it's
good for business because then corporations don't have to pay for your healthcare.
Exactly. Imagine the hub for business you could be if you didn't have the aggressively, constantly growing, unpredictable cost of healthcare as one of your business expenses.
Right. Well, and he, I think, and this is also genius because he's not talking about Medicare for all out here, but one thing that he's talking about is that he has a lot of things on a whole platform on his website about like seniors, and one of the things is that he wants to get private equity out of healthcare, specifically senior healthcare centers, because essentially what happens is that private equity buys out elder care facilities, they saddle them with debt, and then they force them to sell off their real estate holdings and pocket the savings, and then elderly people get screwed, they have to pay too much money, they have to move, all of that. So he wants to block private equity from being able to get into the healthcare industry, and while that is in itself very narrow, it's a specific thing, right? We're talking about elder care facilities,
right?
But the idea that that's a good way to inception people to realize that you don't want big money in your healthcare.
Yes, and it's a start to doing that in other healthcare facilities.
And you want to know who hasn't started doing that? Democrats haven't started doing that.
Well, they don't want to get rid of private equity in any way.
Thank you.
All their money is coming from private equity.
Right.
No, I mean the way that he is framing a lot of the issues that we consider kind of Democratic platform issues is much more broadly appealing to an audience that sees themselves as kind of independent and they're kind of balanced and they're in a swing state and they're in a conservative state and they feel like they're conservative, and yet if you live in a conservative state you don't want all of the jobs to go to the next state over.
Right.
So why would you not want the minimum wage, the federal minimum wage to go up?
Right.
It allows him to also start to talk, he does not support a national abortion ban, but also that's an issue that a lot of libertarian voters can't, I don't think, reasonably say is part of their ideology.
Right. Because he also wants to legalize cannabis.
Right.
So
he's a freedom guy.
Right.
He's a freedom guy. But also...
And he wants money out of politics, too.
He spoke a lot about that.
The way that he came to me in the first place was this ad of his that sort of went semi-viral, which was sort of like a stand-in for his opponent wearing a racing jacket with all of her corporate sponsors on it, as if they were her sponsors. So he's big into that as well.
I have not heard a candidate reference Citizens United in years.
Ages.
He mentioned it 3 times in his stump speech.
Yeah, people have stopped caring.
Yeah. So I know I was really excited to hear that he was talking about campaign finance reform.
Yeah.
I feel like he also gives voice, I think, to what government can do for regular workers in a way that Democrats don't often have the ability to voice because they're not from the working class anymore. And when they are, they're not from this sort of like working class that resonates with like gruff white men.
Sure.
You know, it's like all of the working class politicians that come up now are, rightfully, it's a lot of people of color, it's a lot of women, like it's people that we needed to kind of round out the political our political representation. But this is somebody who can like take the politics, the union politics that, you know, built the populist movement in the first place, or built the sort of like, not even built the populist movement, built the labor movement is what I meant to say in the first place. That a lot of those early movement, you know, actions happened in states that we think of as lost to Trump completely, in Rust Belt states, in places like West Virginia. And the labor movement was born of people like Dan Osborne. And for us to not have anyone who represents that kind of like culture in Democratic politics, or at least progressive politics, is dumb, but we don't.
I know.
And so I feel like this is sort of an interesting throwback in a lot of ways.
I know. But I really hope that he wins, and I hope that Democrats take note and understand why, and I have zero hope that they will do that.
Yeah, that's fair. I think these are all right. But it's a campaign worth following.
They'll be like, ooh, this weird independent. However did he get here?
Right. It's a campaign worth following, and it's also a campaign worth thinking about, not in terms of like, okay, well, this can be replicated in my state.
Yeah, of course.
But what could happen in your state that is different than what is happening now? Like, is there a way in which your state could be uniquely represented by a progressive populist in some way?
Right.
Because also, the right wing has become a really destructive brand of populism, and so I think populism kind of has a bad rap right now. But like, I think I'm sort of like unabashedly a populist in the sense that I think that as a candidate, it is smarter to communicate big ideas to people than small, boring ideas that don't actually accomplish anything.
Totally.
I think leading people with vision, which is a lot of what populist candidates do, is important. And I feel like that is something that we've almost ceded to the right. That was what Bernie Sanders could do. Yeah. And it was some of what Liz Warren could do as well. She could kind of do both, but it was why she had that appeal with progressives. But I feel like we've ceded that culture of political communication to the right, and there's no reason for that, but it makes it seem like we're in a culture war we're not actually in. Because part of it is just how we're choosing to communicate with people.
Yes, I agree.
And figuring out how to communicate with the kind of people that Dan Osborne can speak to should be a priority of the Democratic Party, but it's also doable. Like, people just want their lives to be better. You can tell them how you're going to do that.
Right.
So I think this is an interesting thing to watch, just in terms of thinking about like what kind of communication is possible in your area that is maybe unique to your area. How could you communicate progressive ideas in your area in a way that people could hear? Yeah. How could we do that in rural districts? How could, it's doable.
It seems like all of this could work in Iowa.
Yes. Totally. I think a lot of it could work in upstate New York. I think a lot of it could work across the Rust Belt. I think a lot of it could work in states that I've never been to and never will go to.
It's Sherrod Brown adjacent.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's working in Ohio.
It's working in Ohio, and I think the only challenge that Sherrod Brown has is that he's become such an institution that people have forgotten about this sort of like piece of his story. Yeah. And, the state politics there have gotten so grim, and yet Ohio has, and we hope will continue to have, one of the most progressive senators. Right. So, this is possible across the country in the contexts, where there's like relevant, sort of like cultural communication touch points. But this idea is worth thinking about everywhere. And it's worth thinking about for Democrats too. Yeah. And it's also worth thinking about why there's not room for someone like Dan Osborne in the Democratic Party right now.
Right. Yeah, it's unfortunate that we've come to a world where like for him to win an election, to be taken serious by people, and then also to even have a home, it's sort of like he's unable to do that within this party.
I also think the Nebraska Democratic Party is actually one of the more forward-thinking Democratic parties in the country. They do a lot of kind of like trainings for other small rural parties to help them figure out how to do sort of like effective canvassing and voter outreach operations. They have something called the Block Captains Program where they teach, people how to like take responsibility for 50 voters and like go and do like similar to what we do, honestly.
Sure.
And, and send and make sure that they follow through with them to make sure that they all show up at the polls. Like they do some innovative things at the Nebraska Democratic Party, but they are well aware that they have just like a branding issue because of the,
Yeah.
So, and I think they've been pretty supportive of Dan Osborne's run.
I'm sure that they have. Hopefully they've been doing it in secret.
Yeah. I think
he probably doesn't want to be associated with
exactly.
them.
No, but I mean, like, this is exciting, I think, even for them. But it's, I think, a sign that there's sort of like this larger branding issue that could be addressed if we just seemed like, we were speaking to people.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, let's talk about the VP debate, even though it was last week.
Yeah.
We didn't record last week. So.
And that it was boring.
And it was boring. I mean, it was stressful at the beginning because J.D. Vance did an approximation of a human person.
Yes.
First time I've seen that from him.
Mm-hmm.
And Tim Walz looked nervous at the beginning.
Right.
And then I think, and also it was hard because the very first issues they talked about were issues that they were in lockstep in, which is that we should like bomb everyone and be at war everywhere.
Right, because that was the day that that Iran
Israel
had sent the rockets, I believe.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
Yes.
the rockets to Israel.
Yeah.
So that made it kind of an awkward start for us and them.
Yes.
Once we got into the issues where they actually could draw some distinctions, they were, I think, Tim Walz kind of came alive a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think, I was thinking a lot about kind of like what the effect of J.D. Vance's sort of like debate kid demeanor was versus Tim Walz's like a little bit flustered like dad demeanor. And I actually think it was a very polite debate, weirdly, and I think that for the kind of voters who that debate was for, because I want to be clear, this debate was for like middle-aged white people only. CBS didn't even have a person of color on the panel that introduced the debate. There was not a person of color to be found anywhere in the telecast. I was like, I have not seen a panel that is all white people in a long time on national news television that way. And I was kind of like, it was like notable, the lack of diversity in the CBS landscape.
Sure.
And so I was kind of like, this debate might not be for all of us.
Sure.
I think CBS already isn't a network that I watch. It's the 2.5 Men audience,
Yeah, but it's interesting because like I agree wholeheartedly that Walz seemed nervous at the beginning.
Yeah.
However, I'm off-put just by the sight of J.D. Vance.
Well,
But also, my guess is that a lot of people were put off by his first answer because a lot of times what candidates do is whatever the first question is,
right? They just talk about themselves.
They go into whatever their, right, exactly. They go into their biography. Statement. And Walz didn't do that, and I don't know if it's just because he forgot or what, but it was a somber question, right? So I actually felt while his answer was a little rambly, and you could tell the wheels were spinning, and he was trying to figure out how not to pee himself.
Right.
The fact that he tried to give some sort of actual answer to that, instead of immediately being like, well, I was born in Appalachia. Right. Because the question was like, we're about to do World War III.
Right. What are your thoughts?
What are your thoughts?
Right.
And he was like, well, as a country boy with a mother who was on drugs. And it's like, yes, he did often sort of like sound like maybe he had clearer thoughts.
Yeah.
I feel like it read ick to me.
I also,
and like I said, maybe I'm the...
No,
he always reads ick to me.
He reads ick to everyone, I think. And that was, I think, my sort of larger point is I think that comes through pretty... I think that Americans can see through that polish at this point. And because it came
up immediately because it was the first question.
Remember Vivek Ramaswamy at the debates?
Yes.
Like Pete Buttigieg at a debate? Like these are all people that have punchable faces because of their style of debate being so slick.
Yeah.
So I immediately read that on him. I also thought it was interesting. I was watching the debate in New York, but I was on a text chain with Brent and Grant the whole time. Mm-hmm. And as I was reporting the tone of the text chain to the room, because I was in a room full of like New York City boomers.
Sure.
And I was this debate is playing well in the Midwest, I can tell. Because you and Grant's reactions to things that were getting like kind of eye rolls in the room in New York City were like, oh, I thought that was actually like a pretty good answer for him. And I was like, I think that the intended audience of this debate is responding to it in the way that we would want them to, in a favorable way.
Yeah.
Because I feel like whatever Walz is doing right now, by the end of the room, everyone was in, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, by the end of the debate, everyone was in. So it was like, it grew over time. But even in the early part, when we were all kind of like, oh, is this going well? I was like, I feel like the text chain is telling me it is. Like, I was like, I'm the only one here that's talking in the Midwest right now. And like, I feel like this is playing great. Like, they are liking that he's being nice and civil. They are not, and because in New York, of course, everyone was like, yell at him, tell him all, you know, like whatever. And I was like, I think that's not what his vibe is right now. And I was like, confirmed by the text chain.
Yeah.
And I thought also, oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, go, yeah.
I was going to say, I thought Walz got all of the best sound bites.
That's exactly what I was going to say, too. I mean, like, I don't think we're never going to remember that. I don't think it moved much of any. And everybody who was introducing that debate was just sort of like, the main thing of a vice presidential debate is just to sort of like not.
Right, don't fall down.
Don't
have a fly land on your head.
Right, exactly. Yes.
Don't do anything really embarrassing.
Right, exactly. So none of that happened. So I don't nobody's going to be, you, the listener, has probably already forgotten that even happened last week. But if there were any buzzy moments, they were from Walz, right? There was sometimes it's just the guns.
Right.
Or it was something stupid that Vance had said when they were talking about school shootings, where he was like, we need better doors on schools. Yeah. You know, everybody immediately was like,
stop that.
Right, doors on the schools. And then obviously I think the biggest thing, which they've actually been
turned
into an ad at this point, but the damning non-answer.
Well, and that's all that was debate. They were at that debate to turn it into an ad. And like, you know, that's what the debate is for. The debate is for developing sound bites that you can turn into an ad. And so, and that was when it ended and the whole room turned to me and was like, Lila, what do you think? I was like, Walz got the ad spot, got the ad lines in, and Vance did not.
Right.
And that's all that we needed from this debate. And it was actually kind of an interesting debate because it started off and it was like kind of just no one had good answers on anything. And because it ended with a bang, all of the pundits afterwards had to immediately rethink all that they had that they'd been planning to say about how J.D. Vance had wiped the floor with Tim Walz, because by the end of the debate, like, J.D. Vance looked like a complete fool. He had lied repeatedly through his teeth, and he had been fact-checked by the internet repeatedly by that point. And the moderator.
Oh, that was the other buzzy thing that happened, too.
Where he said, I thought we weren't going to be fact-checking after he lied egregiously about his record on abortion. So by the end of the debate, he had kind of, like, revealed himself a little too much, and Walz had just sort of like, in as respectful a way as you can, been like, I'm going to reflect the frustrations of a regular American who doesn't want to yell and scream about this, but just wants to be like, guy, what?
I know.
So, I think that the most important impact that debate had was that it provided some good ad copy and shots for the Harris-Walz campaign, and that's all it was for. That's why they showed up. You know, so we did it.
Yep.
And now we can talk about the fact that the Cheneys are now doing campaign events with Kamala Harris. I never thought that this would be how things would go. Here's the thing, you guys. I recognize that the Trump world is a different world. Like, Dick Cheney is a good example of someone who understands criming in a way that allows you to stay in government. Yeah. You know?
Well, he's a war criminal.
He's a war criminal.
Yeah.
He's
a torturer.
He's a torturer. He chose the kinds of crimes that are politically survivable, like torturing people and committing war crimes.
Right.
And he did it because he understands the basic rules of staying in power. Unlike Eric Adams, who was like, yep, let's crime with Turkey for no reason and not much benefit on my end other than some trips to Turkey. Who fucking cares? Like, go to Turkey. And Turkey's lovely, but just go.
Right.
It's like, you can just go. Turkish Airlines runs pretty cheap flights to Istanbul. You can just go to Turkey anytime.
Right.
It's not that expensive there.
People are going and getting hair transplants
constantly.
All the time.
You can go get a full body checkup there. You can get plastic surgery. There's plenty to do in Turkey, but like, you can just afford it if you're the mayor of New York City. You don't need to be paid off.
Yeah, the reason that people are going there is because it is cheap.
Exactly. Like, I don't understand what the benefit was. If he's just going to get wined and dined by Turkey, like, anyone can go to Turkey. In any case, I feel like because the Cheneys committed the kinds of crimes that are politically palatable to people, because they're the worst crimes, they have somehow been able to, like, maintain an air of authority that I don't think should be deserved, obviously, by any Cheneys.
Well, they're patriots.
But they are rehabbing themselves, not to me, but in a way that I find distasteful but also interesting.
Well, the only way that they could rehab themselves is with a little help.
That's too true.
And they're getting it right now.
They're getting it, yeah.
And I don't fucking like it.
No. I mean, here's what I'll say about this. I also don't care. I'm like, I would rather never talk about the Cheneys. I would also rather they not be campaigning for Donald Trump. So I guess, what do I know? What I don't want is us to appear with the Cheneys. That's where I feel like the line for me got drawn.
That's what I'm like.
Be like,
Liz
thanks
Cheney,
for the endorsement. Goodbye.
That's exactly it. Like Liz Cheney, she did her bit already where she announced that she was going to vote for her, and then I think said that her dad was going to vote for her.
That's right.
And that
send her on the trail if you want. Do anything. She wants to go on the trail. She's a politician. She probably loves speaking to people for no reason. But don't appear with her. Don't be near the Cheneys.
And don't talk about it all the time.
Nope.
Don't talk about how great and wonderful it is that you got their endorsement and how big of patriots they are and how don't thank Dick Cheney for his service to the country.
Don't assume that voters who just because they are disaffected with Trump like the Cheneys. Nobody likes the Cheneys.
Nobody likes the Cheneys.
Dick Cheney is like the evil empire himself.
Well, we're making Democrats like the Cheneys because...
Well, that's classic Democrats. Democrats love to love a Republican. That's why more Republicans speak at the DNC than like anyone else. The whole DNC is just Republicans speaking about how they're Republicans.
Stop it.
I know. I'm just saying, like, I feel like this is different than like an Adam Kinzinger, or Kitzinger. Is it Kitzinger or Kinzinger? Kinzinger, right? Yeah.
I think, yeah.
Speech, or even some of those ex-Trump officials who like we're never in office. We're just like appointees that have bad taste. I feel like the Cheneys, Dick Cheney is an actual war criminal, and Americans do know that. Anyone who could be moved to vote by the mention of a Cheney is probably someone who hates the Cheneys. I just don't think that they offer the respectability that they are pretending to offer.
Right, so it's like, why be with them when you know how roundly hated they are?
Yeah, you could just be not with them.
You could just be not with them.
Like, I would contend that the Cheneys are more hated than the Bushes. And I know that's not fair.
Certainly Dick. Maybe not.
No, Liz
maybe
less
not
so.
Liz.
Yeah, Liz less so. She's done a better job of rehabbing herself. Dick, if you had to appear at an event and you either could pick George Bush or Dick Cheney to be at that event with you.
George Bush all day, every day, and twice on Sunday.
Yes. Without any hesitation or doubt.
Yeah.
There is no world in which I would ever elect to be in league with Dick Cheney.
We spent 8 years talking about how evil Dick Cheney was. There were memes. There were Mr. Burns memes.
Yes.
There were
people that liked George Bush hated Dick Cheney. Everyone hated Dick Cheney.
Everybody hated Dick Cheney.
So that's why I think it's like a politically dubious strategy to be so excited about them.
Yes.
But what do I know about things? Apparently nothing.
Well, she's getting her political advice apparently from Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, well,
she's learning how to beat Donald Trump in an election from Hillary Clinton.
From the one person who's lost to him. Wait, but I said this before the podcast.
This is why I have to get this ballot out of my fucking house.
No, you have to wait 1 week to sort things. Down ballot. It's for the down ballot.
I've got that sorted
already. For the down ballot. Anyway, I also, though, I feel like I said this right before the podcast, and I'm reiterating again. We've said it before on the podcast. This is why it was a big help to her that she got into the race late.
Oh, yeah.
Because we know that she has actually good instincts personally, but she accepts terrible advice. That's her fatal flaw. She
got 0 delegates in 2020, even after having led the race for a hot minute.
When she gets into a race and she's just she's just on a journey vibing, she does great. People love her. She's popular. She says the right stuff. She has good instincts.
Right. Now that the vibes are over.
Once the vibes are over, though, she cannot... It's not even that the vibes are over, because I feel like if she was just vibing continually, she'd be fine. She just kept vibing, she'd be fine. I think that her instincts are actually really good. I feel like, and maybe this is like in part just sort of like the nature of also being a female politician at this high level. I think that she gets a lot of condescending and bad advice, as all politicians do, but especially female politicians. I think Hillary Clinton suffers from the same thing, but Hillary Clinton also has bad instincts. And so that is like an additional struggle that she has. But Kamala Harris gets herself into trouble because she stops listening to herself.
Right.
And this is, I feel like, what's going on. Everyone's probably been like, you got to shore up those Republican voters who don't want to vote for Trump. And it's like, don't talk to them.
Right. But I think that, like, they're
not voting for Trump.
It's so bizarre. It's so bizarre to me also, though, because, like, that is the Hillary Clinton model.
Yes.
Right? Be Republicans and then tell the other Democrats to get in line. And even Joe Biden, which is the reason that I voted for him and against my better judgment, now in hindsight, asked you to vote for him also, was because he pretended like he heard from the left. Yeah. Now, it's clear after 4 years that he heard absolutely nothing, and that was all a waste of everybody's time. The task forces to come up with different policies that he was going to throw straight in the fucking bin once he got elected. But, like, he at least
Right. He pays lip service to the left.
As a political ploy to get people to vote for him was like, well, hello, leftists. What would you like me to do for you?
Yeah.
And all she's doing is parading around with Liz Cheney and talking about how big of a wall she wants to build.
No, I feel
it doesn't make any sense.
It's bad advice that is positioned to, that is all designed to overcome that she's a woman and a woman of color and is stupid because her own instincts are so much better than this.
Yeah.
Every time that she's left to her own devices in an unstructured way, she does great at winning over a crowd.
Sure.
It's like, it's these weird in-between, because I mean, this is what I think has always been so confusing about her kind of rise to national political fame to me is like, she was our senator, so she ran an entire race in California successfully without ruining anyone's life or her own. Like, it's possible for her to do.
She's been winning elections for a long, long time.
Yeah. And I think at this level, every candidate starts to get bad advice and, starts to get, there's like the data guys come in and there's like a whole system to how you run for president.
Yeah.
And it's a poor fit for female candidates already. And then in addition to that, you got, you have the fact that she came into the race late and there's like all of these obstacles.
Sure.
And so I feel like, at least in her case, like what I think about her individually and what she can and can't be trusted to do as president based on her guiding principles is a little different than what I felt about Joe Biden, who I actually feel is a Republican. Like, I feel that, like, Joe Biden's, like, personal politics and priorities are actually conservative. Whereas I don't feel that as much about Kamala Harris. There are areas in which I disagree with her on things, obviously. But, like, I don't have the same sense that she is, like, personally, like, trying to overcome her. The reason Joe Biden had to reach out to the left is because Joe Biden doesn't share any progressive values.
Sure.
And I think that they always think
but, like, does she? Because she hasn't told me that she does.
I think that they always think that women don't have to do that because it is inherently progressive to elect women. I think that's a mistake.
Oh.
That's what I think is going on here. So I'm both troubled by this turn. I also think it's just the result of bad advice. I'm not as troubled by it as I was in the Clinton era because Hillary Clinton is also someone who I believe has like deeply conservative values.
Right.
Kamala Harris was our senator. I know she doesn't have deeply conservative values. When she was running on vibes, she didn't have deeply conservative values. When she was running for president the first time, she didn't have deeply conservative values.
Yeah, but she also didn't really know what she was running on when she ran for president the first time.
But she's been our senator as well. She's not somebody who I have the feeling I had about the Bidens and the Clintons about. She's a moderate Democrat. I'm not out here defending her politics.
Sure.
I'm just saying, like, I see a slightly different...
Seems like you might be.
No, I see a slightly different situation here that I think is largely the...
Sure. I suppose she was...
the result of a different set of circumstances than what I...
originally seen as a lefty. So yes. I think on some level she's probably doing what she's doing to clean that up.
Yes, she built her political career on being a progressive politician.
Sure.
And now she is on the national stage
right.
and everyone is freaking out about it.
I do feel like she spent like the last 3 months like throwing zero bones to anyone on the left,
agree.
Though.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I feel like, and I think that's a mistake. It's not that I don't think that's not a mistake.
Yeah.
I don't think, when we talk about all these other people, though, none of them had progressive bones to be trying to hide. Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden didn't have a progressive background they were trying to cover up. So I don't have the same feeling about it as I did about them.
Right.
I don't want to be in league with the Cheneys. But
no,
I also don't feel like that signals to me the same thing in this campaign as it would have signaled to me in the Biden campaign, as it did signal to me in the Biden campaign, when I think Liz Cheney also endorsed him, didn't she? Or at least did not endorse Trump.
I don't know. Well, they had that whole, night at the DNC where it was like all the, what's his name from Ohio, the former governor, what the hell is his name? John Kasich and all those people. I don't know if she endorsed, I don't think she did. She may not have endorsed Trump, but I don't think she endorsed Biden.
I think she very publicly didn't endorse Trump. But in any case, I feel like the Cheneys have been flirting with the Biden administration this whole time.
Sure.
I don't see them as that politically far apart. I think in this case, I'm like, wow, this is weird because I do actually see Kamala Harris and the Cheneys as politically far apart. That said,
that could also be a part of why I'm annoyed with it too.
No, I think a lot of what is happening right now is that we're having to do the kind of moderate swing really fast, We didn't get to have the period at the beginning where she built credibility with the left.
Right.
I think they're assuming she has it just because of her background.
Sure.
And I think that you still need to kind of like play to the left a little bit. If you,
yeah.
And you know, they're also, they made more money than anyone's ever made, you know, in history. And they did it quickly. And so I think they're assuming the enthusiasm is there just because people, and these are people that were initially going to run only against Trump. You know, like the whole Biden campaign was being set up to not ever talk about Joe Biden, to just be a campaign against Donald Trump. So this is part of that process, and I don't like it. And I also am sort of like, if it was going to happen, I would rather it happen with a candidate that at one time had progressive values than a candidate that never did. That, you know, I primarily associate with telling us that Medicare for All can't happen.
Right.
And is like a known warmonger. Like, Kamala Harris might be a warmonger, but she's not a known warmonger.
Oh, man. She's doing all the nonsense media this
week.
My
God. She could call her daddy.
People were talking about her not doing any interviews, and she was like, hold my beer.
Right. Going on Stern, going on The View.
Right.
She's been out here.
And she did 60 Minutes, too, so that's where she was talking about her guac.
Right. Yeah, she's got
and
a
then
guac.
gave a whole word salad of, she loves a word salad.
Yeah.
Almost
she does.
more than anyone. She
truly does.
Really, but yeah. But, you know, that's
her.
It's the Kamala Harris experience.
Don't know what a Glock is, even though I know the word. And I've chosen not to know.
I think it's just like a semi-automatic handgun.
You know what?
But she seemed
Those also aren't words I know, and I don't care.
She seemed very gleeful to talk about how she loved shooting at them.
She is much too excited about being a gun owner. All of these people are too excited about being gun owners.
I know. He was like, why do you have this gun? And she was like, well, I have a law enforcement background, and my brain was immediately like...
Don't say no.
Right. Well, but I was also just sort of like, my brain finished the sentence for her, and the end of that sentence is, and we love shooting people.
That's right. So, you know, an uncomfortable moment.
Oh, yeah, well, not for her.
But not for her, no. Proud moment for her.
She was having a laugh riot about it.
That campaign is so excited about their gun ownership. And I am so unhappy about it.
Yeah.
I also feel like I didn't imagine us being in this position because everyone was so... There was like a time that Bernie Sanders said something vague, you know, because he's from like a hunting state. And he had kind of a vague answer about a gun question like early on in his run, and everyone just like lost their minds over it.
I think he had voted against something where like gun manufacturers could be held liable for something or something like that. And it was like the worst thing that a candidate had ever voted on in their entire existence on Earth.
Murdered everyone's grandmother.
Right, exactly.
And to have a Democratic ticket right now that is like this gleeful about being gun owners is like hurting my head.
Stay out of our homes, we'll kill you.
Right, like it's horrifying. Okay. In happier news, Jimmy Carter's still alive and he turned 100.
Is that happier news?
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like, I'll tell you why it's happy.
Okay.
I mean, it's not happy in the sense that I feel bad that he looks terrible and he's old and decrepit.
Yeah.
But I love that Jimmy Carter is our oldest living, or our oldest president.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I like that he has that record.
Oldest semi-living president.
Because I feel like of all the presidents, he's the one who deserves it.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
He's the best one.
Once he dies, the other ones should be forced to die.
Yeah. No, it's like, if you can't, he's the best of all of them.
Yeah.
So it's like at least he should be the one that stays alive forever.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, I don't care about the rest of them.
But I do sort of hate that he's like staying alive in the state that it appears that he's in.
I know, but he's 100. It's like, what are you going to do?
I know. Die.
He outlived Kissinger, so I feel great about that.
Right.
I think he wants to vote in this election. I hope that he gets to vote in this election.
I just don't trust that he wants to do anything.
He has said that he wants to vote in this election.
Did he say that?
I don't know what he has said. In any case, the good news is that we can celebrate that the president...
I mean, happy birthday. I hope that he had a happy birthday.
Yes.
I have no faith that he knew that he was having a happy birthday.
He might just look decrepit and be fine mentally.
Maybe.
Some people are.
I mean, he had brain cancer.
Well, I know, but... I mean, there was a candidate running with brain worms, and he's like still alive and roaming around. So who knows? We're not here to speculate about the mental state of Jimmy Carter. It's nice.
No, I love Jimmy Carter.
That our kindest and most decent ex-president is also our oldest ever president.
I agree. I just am sort of like, and maybe it's because I had the specific experience, but I just feel like, old people get to a certain age and like, whether they're able to, like, tell you or not, like, they might be scared of dying, or they might think that, like, you as the people who will remain after they die don't want them to die, and don't, you know, it's just sort of like, sometimes when people are looking like that, you just have to be like, you can die.
Right, it's okay.
It's fine. All I hope is that his family has told him that he can die.
Yeah.
And I mean that, like, in a loving sort of way.
Yes.
And this, the reason I said that is that happened with my grandmother.
Right.
She was, in her 90s, and she was starting to have dementia, and her health was otherwise going. And it was like, the family was just sort of like, we love you. We know you love us.
Right.
It's fine. We'll miss you. But, like, everything's okay. And she was gone in short order.
Yeah. I feel like early voting has already started in Georgia, so things are probably
Get the man
okay.
his ballot.
Get the man that ballot. Get the man his ballot and get on with it.
Right.
So that he feels released from this burden.
Yes.
And then he can do whatever he wants. If he wants to live
whatever
to
he
106,
wants.
that's his business.
Yeah, and if he's really thriving right now, then I hope he lives to 200.
That's right.
I just fear that maybe after being photographed at his birthday, that's not what's happening.
Fair enough. Yeah. We want whatever's best for Jimmy Carter.
Thank you. That's what I meant to say all along.
That's right.
Instead, I was like, that man should die. You know?
In a loving way, though.
Yeah, that's how I meant it.
In foreign news, which we don't talk about, it seems like the world war is starting. Just stay calm. Or don't stay calm, panic. I don't really know what you should do. It's not great out there. I would just steer clear of
listen to other podcasts
Listen to a different podcast about that. And also, it's natural disaster city right now.
Oh my God.
The number of historically bad hurricanes that are either have happened or are coming through.
That are level 5s or
this
level
new
6s,
one, Milton, does not sound
even
like he's fooling around.
No.
Hopefully, because it's a man's name, people will take it seriously, because they do have a problem with people not taking women's hurricane names seriously.
Oh, is that what happened with Helene?
Yeah. It happens all the time. It happened with Irma. Like, women.
Is that what happened with Katrina, too?
Yeah. People do not take hurricanes as seriously when they have women's names.
Then why shouldn't they? They should all be men's names then.
No, because we need to let people know that women are formidable, too. Men should stop
excuse me,
getting to determine what the hurricane plan is.
I also feel like they just shouldn't be named.
Well, I feel that way too. Or name them something that's not gendered.
Right.
Hurricane.
Or make up names.
Like the Greek alphabet.
Make up like
go back to that.
Make up like science fiction names.
Oh yeah.
I read so many books with names of people that are not real names.
Right. It was like Hurricane Cybot.
Because also like that's unfair to the Helenes and Katrinas of the world. You know?
It's also unfair to the people whose hurricanes didn't pan out to be that exciting.
I know.
Like, if there was a Hurricane Lila, I would be so pissed if nothing happened.
Oh, yeah.
I'd be like,
what a dud of a hurricane
we went through all this
was.
trouble. Yeah. I want to be in the news if I'm going to be a hurricane, you know? Anyway, that's the news this week. We'll be back with props. We're going to be talking props.
Yep.
And it's going to be exciting and fun. Not like your other prop guys.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be...
Well, because they're ridiculous, and we're going to let you know that they are.
So stay tuned for that. We will talk to you next week. Bye.
Bye.